My name is Tiffany Caban, council member for the 22nd District right here in Astoria, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. I have with us today some neighbors and some partners who have worked really hard with us to get to where we are. So I would love to introduce Ms. Koger, who has been a pillar of the Astoria and Astoria Houses community, former president of the Tenants Association, and forever active advocate here in Astoria. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It's just an honor. I give honor to God just to be able to stand here in your presence. I'm a resident of Astoria Houses for approximately 68 years. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the indifference that came in this area. And this was one of the areas that we fought for many years. And we started a program called Two Coves Plan. And with the Goodwill Industries back in the days, and just to see how it's developing to serve the community at large is just a true blessing, and to serve public housing most of all. And most of all, I'm thankful for the councilwoman, how she's diligently working from the inside out to bring justice for the people that live in public housing with all of the growth that's coming up around us here, and most certainly asking us questions as to what she should put in the plan. That we need at the table, and we respect you for that so graciously. And each and every one of you that's come to support this area on behalf of the entire, not just for Astoria, but for the entire city of New York. Because see, we sit on a peninsula that views the entire city of New York, including the tower, from our windows. And also she's with us on clean air and all of these good things. And we just thank you for it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, well, next I am going to bring up Dr. Anju, who runs an incredible organization with our young folks here on the peninsula from Zone 126.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Anju J. Ripshandani, and I'm the Executive Director for Zone 126. Zone 126 works out here in Astoria and Long Island City. We're focused in on 3 zip codes, 11101, 11102, and 11106. We're really focused on supporting children and families living in public housing, Astoria, Ravenswood, and Queensbridge houses. And we've been working here for over 11 years. I'm really grateful to the council member for all of her work around affordable housing. You know, housing has been something that has been, discussed quite often every day in the media and the press. But it's the opportunity to have the conversation, think about how we can give people dignified living, and how we can have the conversation as a community. And that's what the council member brings, the conversation around community and how are we supporting our children and families. So I'm really grateful today to be here and to be here with colleagues, and the fact that we're going to be able to build supportive housing and places that children and families can actively participate in, the fact that they can talk about community. So I'm really grateful to the council member today and to all my colleagues here.
Thank you. Appreciate you. And I just want to shout out, he's standing in the background but does all the things, Mr. Andre over there, who's also with Zone 126. So I'm going to next introduce Carlos Cano from Urban Upbound.
Good morning. Thank you, Councilmember Caban, for inviting us. Thank you for your ongoing leadership and support as well. We at Urban Upbound are excited. We echo everything my colleagues have said before, of course. And we're also excited to welcome Hallets North to the peninsula, not only because their partnership will make it possible for us to serve more New Yorkers in need of workforce and small business development services, not only because they're providing us with a brand new space from where we can incubate worker-owned businesses that create good jobs and lead to building assets, but because they're truly committed to supporting the community, as evidenced by the 3,000 square feet state-of-the-art multi-purpose community space aptly named the Claudia Correa Community Room that will be part of Hallets North when it's completed. Urban Upbound is honored to manage this space, and we can wait to work with our local partners and leaders so we can develop programming, host events, and provide the services this community deserves. For those who may not know Urban Abound yet, we're a community-based organization dedicated to breaking cycles of poverty in public housing and low-income communities. We do this by providing a suite of services, including job opportunities, youth development, tax preparation, incubation of worker cooperatives, one-on-one financial counseling, and Urban Abound Federal Credit Union. I would like to conclude my remarks by highlighting that beyond the investment on Urban Abound, which adds up to $1 million over 10 years, our partners at Hallets North really listened to us from day one. They heard our needs loud and clear, and they have worked with us. We're very much looking forward to a long partnership, to innovating together, and to creating opportunity for the community. And of course, we're looking forward to a long partnership with the council member as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, moving along. Next, I'd like to welcome John Tritt from 32BJ.
Morning, everybody. My name is John Tritt. I'm the Deputy Political Director for SEIU 32BJ. We represent 85,000 workers across New York City and state and 145,000 across the East Coast. I'm here representing our union, but also I lived in this community for 14 years, so I care very deeply about Astoria and what happens to the community at large. So I'm here today, we're here today as 32BJ to celebrate Councilmember Cabán's leadership. I think the leadership she's shown here is evidenced by the partners that are gathered here this morning. And this is to show that through the leadership in the council and bringing together the right stakeholders in the community, good things can happen for the community. It's no secret we're in a housing crisis, but we also need to be creating new housing, new affordable housing, but also creating good jobs. And that's what this project does. This project is going to create building service prevailing wage building service jobs that will provide a living wage, that family sustaining wage. They'll provide health care and good benefits for the families that will work here. We need new ideas, but we also need action. And that's what Councilmember Cabán is taking today. Presenting new ideas, but also taking action. So I'm very happy to be here today. I think this leadership really sets a model for the council. We're standing for the creation of new housing, new affordable housing, and good family sustaining jobs. So I want to congratulate Councilmember Cabán for her leadership and congratulate her colleagues for standing with her on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, and now we have Sabina. I don't want to mispronounce it. Uni?
Don't worry about it.
No, tell me.
Uni.
Uni. All right. Now we have Sabina Uni from the Queens chapter of Democratic Socialists of America.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Hard to follow all these really great speakers, but I'm Sabina. I'm from the Queens chapter of DSA, electing progressive women of color who want to change their neighborhoods block by block. And outside of that, I'm an urban planner and I work with a community land trust in Melrose in the South Bronx that's created to give people self-determination and fight for environmental justice. And I'm kind of here to ask today with Queens DSA, what does socialist land use look like? To me, it looks like kind of acknowledging that zoning alone won't save us, that zoning instead is really a tool to extract resources from developers and real estate to create a more well-funded city. It's not an apolitical tool, so I get really excited when municipal leaders like Councilmember Cabán intentionally co-opt it for radical and generous and exciting purposes. It means doing things like extracting resources for fully funding public housing, for making sure that NYCHA infrastructure upgrades that date back to Sandy and beyond are completed, that elevators and windows are fixed, that boilers are replaced, and that apartments stop flooding after every major and minor storm that continues with increasing severity. It also means working with the state, right, to fully legalize accessory dwelling units, changing codes from parking and ceiling heights to stop the water from rushing in, to make tenants feel really safe calling 311 or accessing other protections that are needed to prevent unnecessary deaths. It also means rejecting the carceral impulses that flow throughout our entire land use and zoning system, from cops at community board meetings to code violations and inspections. Co-opting zoning also means planning for our shared futures, particularly in the face of climate change and more storms. It means rejecting temporary resiliency measures for long-term systemic changes. It also means realizing that people also can't wait for our world to transform to wish their basements stopped flooding, so upgrading our sewerage infrastructure or creating environmental justice special districts with restrictions on waterfront developments, or voting no on rezonings that build affordable housing along the floodplain like in Flushing. Co-opting zoning also means planning in service of reparations, planning that repairs past systems of harm, disinvestment, environmental racism, which can mean investing in community land trusts or other forms of decommodified housing. Finally, co-opting zoning can mean planning that radically thinks participation beyond just community boards, that allows for community priorities to be centralized and argued and talked about, like through participatory budgeting. But more than that, this means planning that reshapes community priorities through deep canvassing, like Councilmember Caban's office already does, that uses unjust rezonings or just rezonings as an opportunity to organize our neighbors and articulate what really matters to us. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So now I have some words to share. They might be a little bit longer than the folks prior, but I appreciate y'all bearing with me. We've got a lot to say. We've worked really, really hard on this. I want to start by thanking everyone for coming, especially our community partners. Today, we're here to talk about land use and our housing system in general. And then we're also here to talk about today's vote on the land behind me in particular. Those who are familiar with me won't be surprised to learn that the way I approach these questions resembles the way that I approach basically all of the other questions. On the one hand, as an abolitionist, as a democratic socialist, I believe in a dramatically more free and prosperous society and therefore advance a vision for a complete system change. On the other hand, as an elected office holder, I face many system-constrained choices today and therefore employ a framework of harm reduction in a given moment. And the thinking goes like this. The beautiful transformation may come tomorrow. A lot of trucks rolling through. So that beautiful transformation may come tomorrow. So it's my duty to see that as many people as possible survive today. And public safety, through guaranteed homes and jobs tomorrow, expand community-based violence prevention programming today. Completely divorce law enforcement from drug use tomorrow, invest in overdose prevention centers today. Decarcerate and demolish Rikers tomorrow, halt solitary confinement today. Less than 2 hours from now, the City Council Land Use Committee will vote on a proposed real estate development for this lot right behind me, Hallets North. I want to lay out a transformative vision for the housing and the land use system of tomorrow, but first, I want to tell you how I will be voting today. So as you can see, the lot behind me is fenced off. It looks a little bit like a dump, but I have to tell you, it looks exponentially better than it did. Because just a couple of years ago, we are talking about a full wasteland, toxic soil, and it was a sacrifice zone of shuttered industry and vacant lots. It contributes nothing to the community. It also prohibits our neighbors from accessing the waterfront. It sends a message to the residents of Astoria houses the next block over that they're unworthy of a safe, comfortable neighborhood. And it holds down the housing supply amid a brutal housing shortage. And the best way we can hope for, or the best we can hope for, without rezoning this lot, because of the current zoning, is a last mile facility where some massive corporation like Amazon would pay our neighbors garbage wages for nonstop, backbreaking work that would clog our neighborhood streets with dangerous, pollution-heavy delivery vehicles. And if that's better than a trash heap, it's not better by much. So a no vote today would be a vote for that. And I cannot and will not vote for that today. And the project I will be voting aye on today comes with a $16 million investment over the past several years, cleaning up this formerly polluted lot of land. It's now going to host park space for everybody in the community to enjoy. It comes with roughly, and we touched on this earlier, it comes with roughly 10,000 square feet of community space for Urban Upbound and Zone 126, which are beloved community-based organizations here in District 22. And they're going to be able to reside in that space for $1 in annual rent. It comes with a $1 million investment to benefit residents of Astoria houses as the tenant association and NYCHA see fit. It comes with deep affordability numbers that exceed our MIH requirements. So specifically, 20% will be affordable to households earning an average of 40% AMI. You've got 10% at 30% of AMI, 10% at 50% of AMI, and then tacking on a further 5% at 80% of AMI, and that brings us up to that deep affordability, but going from that 20% to 25% affordable. So for context, It's important to put this in context. With this project, we'll almost double the units available at 0 to 50% of local AMI. And so let me be super clear on this point. In the last 10 years, Community Board 1 has produced fewer than 500 units below 50% AMI, and this project alone will have 268. So the harm reduction choice is clear, and I believe it would be very, very foolish not to vote aye. So I'm going to transition a little bit. Even though I know it's the right choice for today, like real talk, I want better choices for tomorrow. And obviously, some developer-driven mandatory inclusionary housing projects are better than others, but for-profit development will never produce the scale or quality of housing that our lowest income neighbors need and deserve. And so we deserve a housing system where every single New Yorker, no matter their level of income, has a comfortable home on a guaranteed basis. We deserve sustainable, high-quality social housing owned and managed by the people who live there, in conjunction with the public. New York City has the country's most valuable real estate, and real estate is the country's most valuable asset form. We shouldn't have to offer rewards to billionaire developers to build affordable housing. Instead, we should be able to develop it ourselves without relying on them. And as long as our housing system is geared towards maximizing profits for developers and rents for landlords, the rich will live wherever they want, and everyone else will live wherever they can. And as long as the rich can price out everyone else, we will have the sort of community instability that makes neighborhoods less safe and less healthy. According to a recent HPD report, our city's median income would need to double in order to afford the city's median rent. And fully 1/3 of New Yorkers pay rent over half of their income, or pay half of their income in rent, I should say. And the housing system is intolerable. Homelessness, forced displacement, our current levels of violent danger, and the ever-widening wealth gap are intolerable. We need bold policy change. And so that's why today I am also releasing this agenda that you see here, 10 steps to a more affordable New York City. So we're gonna go through all of them. 1, a revolving social housing fund. Local public housing authorities around the country are figuring out that they can construct publicly owned mixed income apartments at scale through the use of revolving funds vested with relatively small amounts of public money that can finance short-term construction costs. And some counties are on track to build nearly 9,000 such units in the coming years, and if anywhere can do it, New York City can. So I'm in the early steps of bringing that idea before the City Council, and my friends in Albany are advancing a similar program at the state level. 2, a New York City land bank. So for decades, publicly created land banks have been used in cities across New York State and the United States to convert tax delinquent and vacant properties into affordable houses or other productive uses. Whereas currently the city loses the leverage to ensure affordability by transferring title to the land to developers, with a land bank in place, the public would maintain title and set the terms of the redevelopment in the public's interest. So Comptroller Brad Lander has found that a land bank could support the development of over 50,000 units of permanently affordable housing located on nearly 1,500 vacant city-owned properties spanning all 5 boroughs. And then Councilmember Lander introduced this bill previously, and I will enthusiastically support it when it's reintroduced this session. The third is support community-based developers. There are already viable, currently existing alternatives to for-profit real estate development, and we have to support them. Community land trusts, community development corporations, and other nonprofit developers deserve priority when we dispose of city-owned land. That's why I wholeheartedly support Intro 637. It's the bill my colleague, Councilmember Lincoln Ressler, introduced to require just that. Moreover, these vehicles for community ownership should be allowed to make a first offer to purchase any building with low-income tenants should the property owner decide to sell it. And that's a law called Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, or COPA. That's Intro 196, which my colleague, Councilmember Carlina Rivera, has introduced. 4, the people's tax liens. Right now, if a slumlord doesn't pay their taxes or water, sewer, or emergency repair bills, the city sells the right to collect the debt to a predatory so-called investor who makes things worse for everyone involved and negotiate a sale of the building to a new landlord, leaving tenants in the dust. Instead, we can say enough is enough of that, and instead of selling those tax liens to for-profit firms, we should use the tax liens to seize the neglected holdings and convert them into social housing controlled by the people. Simple as that. So to be clear, this proposal is specific to bad landlords, not working class homeowners who are just struggling to pay unmanageable tax burdens on their homes. New York City has done this before. It's how we created a robust stock of below market nonprofit rentals and working class cooperatives in the first place, and it's time to do that again. 5, eliminate voucher red tape. I'm gonna take some water. So when DHS, when the Department of Homeless Services deems a New Yorker eligible for a housing voucher, they receive, to rent an apartment, they receive a so-called shopping letter, right? And that shopping letter identifies the maximum rent a recipient can pay based on household size and income level. And unfortunately, right now, this maximum rent often includes utility fees. It forces a lot of voucher recipients to stay in our shelter system for much longer than they should. So that's why myself, along with Deputy Speaker Ayala, have introduced Intro 229, which is a bill to eliminate the utility allowance from that equation. 6, fair chance for housing. It's long past time we prohibited housing discrimination against formerly incarcerated New Yorkers. It's affecting 11% of the adult population, who are 10 times more likely to become homeless than the general public. This has profound implications for public safety. Without a stable home and permanent address, it's much harder to secure employment, healthcare, or educational programs, and it's keeping people trapped in a cycle of incarceration and criminalization. So this spring, the New York City Speak survey, the largest poll in this city's history, found that New Yorkers' top priority for enhancing public safety is housing and homeless services. So I'm proud to support Intro 632, which is the Fair Chance for Housing Act that was introduced by Majority Leader Keith Powers. 7, we're getting there, y'all. The Survivor Housing Stability Fund. We like to come with receipts. Plans are important. It's time we did right by survivors of gender-based violence. For too long, the city has cynically used violence survivors' trauma and pain merely as a pretext to ramp up policing, prosecution, and incarceration, leaving the actual survivors without access to services and the protections that they need. So I've introduced a legislative package called Support Survivors, and Intro 153, which is part of that package, is a program that addresses the economic precarity that again and again, the Committee on Women and Gender Equity, the committee that I chair in the council, has heard from survivors as a central barrier to leaving their dangerous situations, accessing the services they need, and beginning to heal. And so this law would provide low barrier, urgently accessible grants to survivors for housing as well as other immediate expenses and services. 8, eliminate parking minimums. The zoning rule that forces developers to include parking spaces in many new developments across the city, it's antiquated, it's hazardous, it leads to more congestion, more pollution, less affordable housing, and higher construction costs that are then passed along to tenants. And so we should do away with it and make our city safer and healthier for cyclists and mass transit riders. And there's legislation from Assemblymember Brad Hoylman and Senator Alessandro Biaggi at the state level, but we should take action at the city level as well. And number 9, protect New York State tenants. We as a council must support in every way possible the fight for good cause eviction legislation in Albany. This would grant every tenant in the state protections against unjust eviction and unreasonable rent increases. Landlords would need to have good cause to terminate a tenancy, meaning tenants would be free to organize their neighbors into tenant unions without fear of losing their homes. If a landlord were to jack up rents over a certain threshold, that's 3% or 150% of the consumer price index, whichever is larger, tenants could challenge them and require the landlord to justify the increase, placing an important check on the sort of price gouging rent hikes that are fueling the current tsunami of housing precarity. And finally, 10, support union wages. The cost of housing is only one half of the housing affordability crisis. The other is New Yorkers' ability to pay. According to a city report released this year, the median New York income would need to double to afford the median New York rent, and nothing boosts wages as reliably as unionization. That's why I'm working with a broad array of labor stakeholders to introduce a universal just cause bill that would require and remove workers' fear of being, I should say that it's a bill that would remove workers' fear of being fired by union-busting bosses and create an explosion of union organizing across the city. So I'm very, very excited about that. And I want to conclude by saying this plan right here, these 10 pillars right here, this agenda is viable, it's realistic, and it's ready for rapid implementation. All it takes is courageous political leadership that is not afraid of the big real estate interests who have dominated this city's economy and politics for far too long. And together, we can build social housing. Together, we can get our neighbors off of the streets and out of shelters and into their own comfortable, reliable homes. Together, we can adopt a democratic, transparent process for making political decisions about land use that center the needs and the dreams of everyday New Yorkers rather than the profit motivation of billionaire real estate capitalists. And together, we can make this affordable city for all New Yorkers. And if we want that for our collective tomorrow, we can start by committing to this agenda today. And so again, I just want to thank y'all for being here and standing with us on this. And thanks for coming. It was a very long speech.
Long speech. If there are any questions, we've got time for just a couple before we have to get the council member over to City Hall.
Yeah.
So the 2016 report from the comptroller said the social housing fund and the land bank could create around 60,000 affordable units. The New York Housing Conference put their estimate at the deficit of affordable units in the metro area at over 700,000. So how can we get the rest of the way there? What will that take?
Yeah, I mean, it's a multifaceted approach, right? And that's why we put together a plan like this, because we say the same thing about whether it's public safety issues, public health issues. You have to go to the root, and you're going to find solutions that will alleviate that issue by tackling it from all angles. Raising wages so that New Yorkers are making more money. There's so many other things that also aren't included in here, like legalizing basement apartments to, maximize the number of units available to folks. But really taking each piece and saying, like, they are all tools in a multifaceted toolbox that can chip away at the gap that we're seeing.
Could you lay out the changes that have happened to the Houseman proposal? I think
Yes.
weeks ago, there was like 25% of the units were going to be below market. Were there negotiations that you were a part of?
Yeah, there has been a lot of changes. Early on in the process, they had gone to the community board a couple of times. We did virtual meetings, we did in-person meetings with the community and got a sense of what folks wanted out of this project. And so initially, they came, to their credit, with to the table at MAH option 1. Not the deeper affordability option, but MAH option 1. They made a proposal. The community board and other community members gave feedback that they wanted to see, for example, more 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units in this development. They did that and switched up the numbers so there are less studios and 1-bedrooms and a lot more 2-bedrooms and 3-bedrooms to accommodate families. Was really adamant about pushing on affordability. And so, for folks who are familiar, in order to get that deep affordability option under MIH, you then go down to 20% of units that are end up being at those affordable rates. And so it was really important to us to make sure we got back up to that 25 and then also lowered the AMI range. And so instead of seeing the typical 40% to 80% AMI, we're looking at a package of units that goes as low as 30% of AMI to that 80%, and then locking in those legally capped rent prices for a whole 25% of those units. Not to mention that the environmental issues were a huge deal. Initially, the plans didn't include an additional 9-foot setback to account for resiliency. We had them make changes to maximize the public space. So I'll give you a quick example. There's like I don't know what you call it, a cul-de-sac or they're creating a street to come into here. Also because emergency vehicles have to be able to have access. We were able to get them to make that smaller to maximize the green space for folks. That was a big thing. We went really in depth with them on what they call these oyster-shaped land marshes that are going to be around the green space that will collect rain, right? Like they will be rain gardens, again, about the environmental resiliency. And then in addition to that, we had conversations about what that space would be used for. We wanted to make sure that people felt invited and moved to walk to the back and enjoy the space, that it didn't feel like a space that was just for the tenants that will ultimately live in this building, but the community at large, that we had active uses, so there will be picnic and barbecue areas. negotiating the partnerships with our community-based organizations, the investment in Astoria houses, and then also, we talked about safety, right? Had conversations about how we did not want to see private security patrolling this open space, and a commitment to create, a group of stakeholders, community folks to come together and have regular conversations about how we keep an open, safe, but not surveilled, and putting people at risk of criminalization, vision for the space around us. So we've come a pretty long way, I think, from those initial steps to where we landed today.
Maybe one more question?
Do you think market rate housing has a role to play in solving the affordability crisis? And if you do, what is it?
It's tough, right? What I would say is that to truly tackle the housing crisis at its core, we need not just affordable housing, but deeply affordable housing for the folks who are experiencing housing precarity, experiencing homelessness, and there are constraints on the system within which we're in. We know that under the system, we are going to see building of more market rate units. That's a reality, and a reality we cannot ignore. And so again, that's why we take this multifaceted approach of saying, as we are working on this long-term vision to really transform the way we do rezoning and city planning and development, that we can ease some of this crisis, do some harm reduction, and get more people in homes by doing things like raising wages so that more New Yorkers can afford market rate apartments, for example. But would I say that is, in a vacuum in and of itself, the answer? No. But the answer is a lot of things we talked about, right? Making sure that we are expanding social housing around the city. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate you.